Hello, everybody. Man, I can't believe you made it. Let's see. Who else is in here. I think we have a total of, I believe, like 24 people, but it's very rare that we have like everybody, so it's kind of like take turns a little bit. It's kind of tricky because, it's like people are all over the world and sometimes like doing sacrifices, right? Like waking up like at 4 in the morning or going to bed at 4 in the morning is pretty crazy, that you guys do that. I used to do that kind of stuff, but nowadays I'm too old for that. But, I hope everything okay with you. It's like I hope everything is it's fine with your families and everything. We just came back from a little bit of time with the family. We kind of like just like my wife's father and mother, and brother. So we just got together and hopefully we are COVID free, but thankfully the internet is going to be safe for you guys. You're not going to get COVID from me. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about it's like how this program works normally. Obviously, if you guys already look through all the videos and everything, it's like if you start doing some tutorials on your own, you notice a little bit of the pattern, it's like how things work. The cool thing about those it's like live classes is that you guys obviously can ask questions at any time. It's like if something is lingering, you can actually solve the problem right on the spot. I tend to try to develop a little bit more. For example, like if I'm on a roll with something, I just like keep going for a little bit. Sometimes you guys might ask, it's like, oh, can I ask a question? I might have to say, it's like just a second, it's like until I finish this thought here and then we continue, just so we don't interrupt the flow. But in general, I mean, like, yeah, it's going to be kind of like an open forum, and hopefully I'm going to be able to help you guys to, to learn a few things here and there. Some of you are like beginners sometimes, people who subscribe to those classes. Sometimes are professionals, it's like I have many professionals like for all kinds of studios out there. And even some colleagues from ILM, I had a few colleagues from ILM already did those classes with me. And the thing that the way it works is basically I have my little workflow, it's like I do things a little bit different. Not exactly how you would expect, like in a pipeline, like for a studio, for example, but it's kind of like a simplified version of it. It's like I try to strive for results. So what happens is that sometimes, it's like if you have a complicated pipeline at a studio, if some of you guys are professionals, you should know that, sometimes it takes forever for you to, it's like to see the result of your work, right? Like if you're modeling something, you have to go through, the look dev artist and the texture artist, it's like a lighter, it's like until you see like some animation, whatever it is, it's like depending on the type of pipeline. And sometimes it takes, it's like 3 days, 4 days, 5 days to see anything. And the cool thing about this is that we are in charge here. We are in command, right? So we're going to be able to do like sometimes many iterations in the same night. It's like you're going to see the way that I use HD geometry is not so much about, it's like the type of features that you get out of it, which are incredible, but you have like some limitations, things you cannot use, like layers you have to use just like outside of HD and things like that. But what you gain from HD, in my opinion, which is great, is the speed of the displacement maps being exported. It's like you can get a set of displacement maps, like let's say like 5, 8 UDIMs exporting less than 10 minutes, which is great, so you can have like multiple iterations in the same day, which is awesome. But I'm going to start by introducing a few things here, it's like you are probably familiar, but just like to recap a little bit. So starting with the website, right? This is basically what you see when you enter the, it's like the page for the class. It's something similar to this. This is from March 2020, but it's pretty similar. You probably can see something like this. It's like those links in there. Let me see if I can go back in here and see if I have everything set for you guys for the August one here. Let's see, August 2020. So start course. Let's see. Yeah, that's probably what you can see in there in the page, right? So I put a bunch of references in here and a couple of books as well. Those books are very cool. And I would say that there's another one, this one here, the Anatomy of Fish. Oh, sorry, I'm not sharing my screen just yet. Let me just You know, it's like last class I thought was in April, so I'm a little bit rusty right now, but I'm gonna do it. Let's see, share computer sound, not necessarily, so screen one, this one. Can you guys see the screen now? Awesome, all right. So yeah, so some of those books are very good, but this one here especially, it's a little bit expensive, you know, it's like this Anatomy of Facial Expression by all these Zarins. So it's this one here, you can see it, right? You can get it from Amazon. I mean, like I have no association with the author or anyone related, but I mean, it's an amazing book, you know. I'm not making any bucks by promoting it, but it's just like a very good resource. It has everything you need, you know. I'm gonna pretty much like put this one as the main book, you know, as like as a reference, because we need to understand the anatomy of the face, right? If you're gonna be sculpting portraits, there are like very common mistakes we're gonna go run into, you know, it's like you know, some relationships, like the distance between the points, you know, it's like profile, for example, it's very important. I mean, like some people, they nail the likeness when they're sculpting likeness from the front view, and then as they start turning the model around, you know, it's like start kind of like falling apart a little bit, because sometimes the you know the references, you know, it's like the relationships are not correct, you know, it's like either like the orbital area is a little bit too deep, you know, sometimes is a little bit too, you know, too forward, something like that. Although you know, it's like there's always this average that we look for when we're sculpting something. That's this average that we look for is it's a matter of like a personal preference, I would say. You know, it's like this collection of images that you saw during your life. I mean, like from comics, from, you know, it's like going to museums and everything. And then all of a sudden you have like a couple of, you know, preferences in terms of what harmonic, you know, it's like a human face should look like, you know, it's like it can be like a Greek ideal, or it can be something else, you know, it's like a little bit more modern, or more like towards comics and stuff like that. But you have kind of like this mental library that you keep building across, you know, it's like all those years. And I don't think you're ever going to be like complete, you know, like we're never going to have like a complete idea of everything, because everything feels right. Like every time you see a cool piece of artwork, it can be a drawing, painting, whatever it is, you kind of like, oh, I really like this, but why do I like this? And you start looking like, oh, the shape of the nose is very interesting. You know, it's like there's some rhythm in there, you know, it's like there's some straight lines combined with some curves and everything. And you start like looking closely to those forms. And then all of a sudden that becomes like your new favorite nose, let's say, you know. And then all of a sudden, like you start assembling this kind of like this clip art library in your brain of your favorite things. So it's a cool thing because you develop some style, right? Like, so you have like your favorite way of sculpting a female face or a male face. But at the same time, every time you see something that's a little bit awkward, you know, it's like a little bit out of the norm, let's say, it becomes very strange. You know, it's like it's hard to accept when, you know, like I said just minutes ago, you know, when the orbital area is a little bit too deep. But you're definitely going to find people who have that, you know, it's like with the muzzle area very pronounced, with the nose very pronounced, you know, it's like a little bit simian almost, right? And it's a natural thing, you know, it's like it happens with certain people. So there's always a difference between like idealizing something, right? Like creating something that's out of your own clip art library, you know, from your brain, and actually looking at someone who has like some different you know, proportions and everything. And I'm growing like more fascinated with this type of people, you know, it's like a little bit more different. If you saw some of my previous work for the other classes, I try to go across like ethnicities, right? Like, so, and the last one I thought was actually in April was for my Brazilian friends. It was an albino lady, right? So she has like it's black features, and then with the pale skin, which is really very cool conceptually, especially now with this very, you know, it's like weird times that we live in. It's conceptually is very cool, you know, it's like to almost like represents, you know, it's like it's just skin, you know, it's like at the end of the day, it's just skin. But so I'm gonna just go back here and I'm gonna show you a couple of things. The first one is gonna be like my subject for this class, which I normally keep a secret all the way to the end, right? And here's the thing that I have to do though. Disclaimer is that I cannot go for full likeness, because you know, it's like there's the whole thing about the copyright. Someone who has a likeness, right? Like if it's someone famous, I can get sued if I get like a nail likeness and if I make any profit with it. Basically, like if I'm selling my classes, I cannot profit, you know, out of someone's likeness, right? So normally what I do, I try to play with those, you know, it's like I get the main subject and I introduce other elements in some of my own mental library, you know, some of my favorite things, and I change the subject, and I never use like the real name, you know, when I post online, because you guys are students, you're doing, for example, like fan art. I don't see any problem for you guys getting sued, you know, it's like doing likeness of someone famous, like an actor or something. But in my case, since I'm making some profit, right, like that's the problem. So my main subject is going to be this guy here. His name was Sam Burns, and he has a very interesting condition that's called progeria, and it makes like those kids age super fast. So they look like old people, you know. And they are, this little guy, he died when he was 17 or 18 years old, like 6 years ago or so. And he was kind of like, he did like TED Talks, you know, and things like that. And talking about like this, his philosophy of happiness and things like that, you know, it's like some people sometimes when they're going to be concentrating on that, but obviously they're going to have to create like a more generic character, like, you know, it's like someone with progeria. But basically he's going to be like my main reference for this class. Obviously, because we're going to be doing a lot of stuff with XGen, right? We're going to be doing like eyelashes, eyebrows, hair, and stuff like that. I'm going to, at some point, adhere to him just to be able to teach you guys. But my final model probably going to be just like him. You know, it's like not exactly like him, but like in a sense, like this style, right? Like no hair. But don't worry about it. We're going to go through the whole thing. So this is his parents, and you know, it's like very, very cool character, you know, very charismatic, but also, you know, some people are gonna say like, oh, he looks a little bit like a little monster, you know, because that's kind of like the way we see monsters in those movies, right? Like with the veiny, bald heads, right? Like kind of like you know, it's like a bunch of examples out there. But in this case, it's just like, to me, it's just part of who he was, you know. It's like, it's just like so cool to see those interesting forms, you know. It's like there are no less beautiful than, you know, it's like someone who has like you know, it's like ideal proportions, you know. It's like, it's just like a lot of fascinating forms for us to explore, you know. And the fact that he's not like, he has those kind of old features, but his skin itself, you know, it's like he's not like hyper wrinkly in a certain in some ways, you know. So it's almost like if you look back like my work, I do a lot of like old people and stuff. I'm very fascinated by that. But in this case, it's a challenge, you know. It's like, because he's a young guy with kind of like old features, but not necessarily a super old skin, you know. Like his neck is still kind of, you know, it's like cool in there. So yeah, that's going to be my subject. I'm going to start by asking you guys to actually make sure that you have like the latest of everything we're going to need. So if you're using like Maya for students or something like that, make sure you have your latest version. If you don't, I mean, you know, for the past, like, let's say like 3 or 4 versions, it didn't change a lot. You know, it's like, I would say the XGen actually improved, you know, it's like in the past like 2 or 3 versions. But if you can get like the latest one, like Maya 2020, this is basically what I'm using right now. And we're going to be doing some setup actually for ACES, because we're going to be using ACES color for our renders. You know, it's like, instead of like using the regular sRGB color mode, we're going to be exploring ACES, because ACES is more flexible. You know, it's like you get a lot more information in the color. And it's like you can create like a more realistic images, you know. It's like when you have more control over the, you know, like the gamma, you know, of you know, it's like colors that are possible within the renders, right? So we're going to be using ACES, which was, if I'm not mistaken, was created by Sony. And, you know, so they use like in their movies and all this stuff. So, and now it's maintained by another group. I mean, like this one was created, and then there's a branch, I think, that was created by this user, Cal Solar. And then, so the latest version is this ACES 1.2. As you can see, like the other ones were created like 3 years, 5 years, 6 years ago. But this one here, ACES 1.2, is only 5 months ago. So this is the latest one. So to get this one, you have to go to this address, github.com color science open color IO configs. I'm gonna post this link in our page, you know, it's like together with the introduction probably, or maybe in the first lesson. I think I'm gonna put in the first lesson in there. By the way, those ones are just placeholders right now. We're gonna be replacing with the actual text as we go. I'm gonna ask you guys to go over there and download this folder here. I'm not sure how to download just the folder. I normally just get the entire thing, which is just like download a zip. But if you download the zip, it's gonna come with everything here. And it's gonna be like a couple of gigs, I think. They're big, they're very big. This one is gonna be the one we're gonna be using. So the first thing I'm gonna ask you guys to do is this. You're gonna go to your, let's go to your personal. So I have like a folder here that's called personal projects, and that's where I keep all my projects in there. And I normally create a folder with the name of the character. So for example, like Asian Tribal Lady, you know, it's like Alex Gray, Albino Goddess, whatever name I give, right? So I'm gonna ask you guys to create a folder that's gonna be the main folder for this entire project that we're gonna do during these classes, right? So in my case here, I just create a folder called Sammy. And I just put this symbol in the beginning just so it pops right at the top in here. And then inside of it, I create a folder called references, right? And then inside of this folder reference, I'm gonna put all the pictures, you know, if you guys are gonna go for likeness or whatever you wanna do. If you wanna do creature, I'm gonna leave completely free to you guys. You pick like the character you wanna do. If you're gonna do likeness, I'm gonna try to help it the best I can to be able to see, you know, so I can fix your models, whatever it is. If you're gonna go for creature, we're gonna try to adapt all the techniques we are using so the creatures, you know, can come to life through life as well. And then, this like the way I created here, I have like this folder called personal projects, like I said, with all those characters. And then inside of this folder personal projects, I have one folder called ACES config. So this folder can be anywhere in your hard drive, not necessarily here. I keep it here because it's easy for me to find. But make sure that when you unzip that folder, this one here, 1.2, right? Which should be contained within this gigantic zip file, unless you have a way to, you know, download just this one here. Basically, like when you unzip it, make sure you save that the folder where you unzipped it. So basically, inside of this folder now I have this contents here. As you can see here, if I click ACES 1.2. See baked Lutz Python and the readme config .ocio, right? So basically, like those are the folder, the files I unzipped in here. It's the same ones, right? So first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna set up our scenes to make sure that everything runs smoothly. We're gonna have to be careful about the way we set up our ACES config. We're gonna have to be careful about the scale units we're gonna be using in Maya and ZBrush to make sure that everything is world scale, because that's going to influence, you know, it's like the parameters you're going to be using, like for the skin shaders and things like that. So just like in this first class is basically like setting up things, making sure we have our configurations all ready to go. And at the end of the class, I start doing a sketch. Basically, I'm going to start doing like very free sketch of that character, right? Just to get the, you know, to know the character, basically. Like you start exploring the forms. My sketches are very loose. You probably saw some of that stuff on Instagram. You know, they start very loose and they progress. You know, it's like I start refining them more and more. But the first class is just like a quick sketch. Let's start with this. So I'm gonna leave it to you guys to download those files and extract anywhere in the hard drive. And I'm gonna start my Maya here first. I'm gonna make sure that I'm starting everything fresh. I just installed the new ZBrush 2021. Had no chance to play with the cloth stuff just yet. And I even made a joke on my Facebook, you know, it's like saying that all these people who sculpting robots and hard surface gonna be very tempted to cover them all with the clothing and stuff now. It's gonna be fun. So this is my Maya here. Just get everything set. Takes a little bit just to run. So you see that in my interface here, I have XGen Interactive Groom Editor on the side in here. That's because my workspace on the top right in here, I set up to XGen Interactive Groom. And that's basically like the interface that I use the most, you know, my workspace, because that gives me the outliner here, the attribute editor, channel box, and also the XGen Interactive. So basically, like the way you do it, it's just like click in the drop-down menu, select Interactive Groom, and you should have like the same interface as I do in here. I'm assuming that you guys like know a little bit of Maya, but I understand that some of you guys maybe have no idea about Maya, and I was like, it would be ideal if we all knew a little bit of it, right? But the gist of it here, like you see, like I have this shelving here, and this shelf here has my name in it. The way you create like new shelves, if you don't know how to, you basically like you can go here, you just click new shelf, right? And you can just like give a name in there, and then you're gonna have a new shelf right here, right? So now I have test. So every time you need to create like shortcuts, you know, it's like basically the way Maya creates those shortcuts. It basically like everything is a script, right? Like so, for example, like if you create like this sphere in here, right? Create a polygonal sphere to the grid. So if I do this, if I go to my script editor in here, see, this is basically the parameter here, the command to create that sphere. So it's basically like it's a script, right? Like so every time you create like a new shortcut here, an icon to create like anything, to do any of those functions in the menus in here, it's basically like it's a script that's recorded, right? So the way it works is like this. If I press, let's go to, if I want to create a sphere here and add like an icon in here, I'm gonna go like a control, let's see, control shift, I believe. Yeah, control shift. So you hold control shift and you go to the menu where you want to create, you know, it's like or add like a shortcut for it. And for example, like shift control, click, and then this. So basically like I create all those guys right here, right? So let's say if you have like something like, if you want to create an edge loop, right? You can either double click, obviously, you know, in Maya you can just double click to create the edge loops. But let's say you want to create like an edge ring, right? Sometimes, let's see, if you just click one and then shift and click the next one, you can create that. But sometimes people like to use just icons, you know, it's like to do that kind of stuff. So all you have to do is basically find this function where it is here. For example, select, right? Continuous edges or convert selection, you know, it's like the vertices, edge loop, whatever it is. And you can just press Control Shift, right? So now you created that one. So you can, if I click this guy, just click, that's the edge loop. So basically like that's the way I created this whole, you know, shelving here, right? Which the stuff that I use the most. The history, and the reason why I have two histories in here is because we're gonna use the XGen. And XGen is very interesting because it can break at any time. It's a very buggy piece of software. Very powerful. You can do, you see like all the work you see on the internet done within XGen. Very powerful stuff, you know, but it's super buggy as well. So the reason why I have two histories, because the first one here, as you can see, is delete construction history on the selected objects. And this one here is for everything. It's an entire scene. So delete history on all objects, which you can find right here. Edit, delete by type history, which is basically like just for the object you have selected, or delete all by type history. Those are very different things. If you delete all by type history, this one is gonna probably like destroy your XGen and eliminate all the history in the entire scene. And we need some relationships preserved. So that's why I always use just the delete history on selected object. That's it, right? I don't wanna delete all that stuff. So here's my Maya. That's just like a little quick reminder of how the shelves work, right? So if you wanna create your own shelf in there, I have my history, I have like the primitives, freeze, reset, and freeze and reset the transformations, and then center the pivots, right? I have stuff like combine polygons, blah, 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 all that stuff. But what we're interested right now is to actually set up our color space, right? Which in this case is already set in here, but I'm gonna show you exactly where you go. You're gonna go right here. So if you click this little guy here, animation preferences, which is basically just preferences, or if you go to Windows setting preferences, if you click on it, oh, interesting. It failed from there. Well, let's use this guy here then. So if you go to color management, you're gonna notice I already have everything configured. So by default, it's probably gonna be like this, everything off for you. So you're gonna basically you're gonna turn it on. It's again like it's gonna be under settings, color management, and then you're gonna point to the file that you downloaded from that package, if you remember. So it's gonna be in my case here under ACES config, right there, and then there is this config.ocio right there. So I'm pointing exactly to it. F blah blah blah. This one, right? You're just gonna click those two. You're gonna leave this one off, right? And then for the rendering space, now you're gonna see ACES CG in here. And for the view transform, you're gonna have a bunch of different things. I'm gonna keep sRGB ACES. Basically, like it's a conversion from the ACES to sRGB. So it's gonna be using my monitor color space, but converted from ACES. So everything's gonna be ACES, but in order for me to see the colors correctly, it's basically converting to sRGB for me, right? And then we have a bunch of rules in here. They're very interesting. By default, I don't think you have those rules, but you can always add them. The way it works is like this. You're gonna create, like, you're gonna click add, and you can just add, for example, like PNG here that we don't have yet, right? So PNG. So PNG, I'm gonna switch in here to PNG, right? So to match that I just did. And what do I want it to do in order to be able to use all the textures correctly, right? The thing that sucks is that there's no automatic way to do this by default, so we have to set up those rules. But the way it works is like this. If you have like files like HDRIs and EXR, so for example, like displacement maps, you know, it's like, oh, in general, like 32-bit maps, right? 32-bit maps, you're gonna be using this format here, which is one of the many ones they have in there, right? Is the linear utility, linear sRGB. So every time you import the texture into Maya, it has to be converted in order for ACES to understand that the color correctly. Basically, like it has to convert to its own color, right? So you're gonna be converting anything that's like 32 bits, like HDRs and EXRs, and TIFF32, for example, like if you're exporting displacement maps in TIFF32 from ZBrush, you're gonna be converting to utility linear sRGB. Now, for everything that's 8 bits, you know, it's like, you know, BMPs, JPEGs, PNGs, although PNGs can be 24 as well. But you're gonna be converting to sRGB texture. So that's the difference, right? One is linear sRGB, which is for the 32 bits we talked about. And the other one's here, sRGB texture. Again, it's gonna be in the middle of this gigantic list that's gonna be created when you install ACES, right? When you point to this file here, those lists is gonna be created for you. So once you have like your rule set in there, basically like this, right? Like PNG, JPEG, BMPs, you can always set to utility sRGB texture, and then just the EXRs, 32-bit TIFFs and HDRs, you're gonna set to utility linear sRGB. Then here, those are the settings I use. Some people use different ones, but I'm using just like the apply output transform. So basically like based on the view transform, and use view transform in here. And I have my enable, that format in there. I didn't change anything else here. So basically like that's, I don't remember if I added this one. I don't remember, but this is not important right here. It might have been automatically, but I'm not sure. This one you don't need to create if it's not there by default. So once you have everything set in here, make sure you save it, your config. So when you save it, I'm getting some errors in my Maya here for some reason. First, it refused to open my settings, and now it's saying like a permanent script job cannot be killed. That's so bizarre. That's a good start, isn't it, Maya? I just updated my Maya today. It was fine. Let me just close it very quickly. Let's see if it solves the problem when I reopen it. But that's not a good start. I updated all my software today just to make sure everything was with the latest, but yeah, we never know what's gonna happen. Let's see. I'm already aware that XGen is gonna cause us some headaches in the future, but because he always does. But this kind of stuff here is not very common to happen. So let's see if there's anything else going on. Alembic, blah, blah, blah. Let's see if Arno is the latest. I believe it is. I installed the latest Arno too. So the first thing you're gonna check is just like if my settings in here is working. So let's see, Windows, settings, preferences. Man, it's not working. God dang it. Oh man. Well, I'm gonna do something here. We're gonna have to, I'm sorry guys. This is the kind of stuff that you never know. And then let me open ZBrush meanwhile so I can start doing something with ZBrush. But meanwhile, let me just do something here, which is I'm gonna try to delete. There is a file in here. Let's see if I can find it. Let me just move around here. It's gonna be under C users. Let's see. Cool. Maya 2020. Let's see. Let's see if this is gonna work for us or not. So there's a file in here that's under like your documents, Maya 2020. There's this My environment in here, which sometimes if we rename it, just like you don't need to delete it. Let's see if that works for us. And this is gonna be my first time actually using the new ZBrush as well. Actually, second time because I just opened it to test a little bit today. So hopefully things gonna get smoother. But the thing that I do in my ZBrush while we wait for Maya to load in there, the first thing is to set up my documents. So I'm gonna just go here. I'm just gonna, I don't like this, you know, gradient in the background. So I just do a little bit more neutral like that. And then my monitor right here is like 1920. This like it's 1080p, right? It's just like a tablet, HD tablet, like an old one. So I'm probably gonna use something like, let's try like 1600 by, let's not do proportional here. Let's do 1300, something like that. Yeah, that should be good. It's pretty much like, it's pretty perfect in there. So, and then I'm gonna save this as a startup document. Save it, cool. So next time I don't need to do that. Let's go back here, just make sure that Maya, let's see if anything else happened here. Oh man, that's gonna be hard to work, to show you guys this stuff. Well, I'm gonna count that basically like your Maya is working and I'm gonna try to figure out how to fix mine. But all this stuff that I did in here, actually he saved the PNG, look at that, he saved it. It's giving me that error, but actually saved it, look. Because I created the PNG later, so it worked in there. But since we're not gonna be using a lot of Maya today, it's mostly like for the setup here, I'm gonna just assume that your Maya is working, so click save in there, you should be fine, right? And then I'm gonna try to figure it out tonight, what's going on with it. Another thing I need you guys to do in Maya, and let's hope that this one's gonna work as well, is this. So basically like what I have in here, let's move this around here. All right. So inside of that folder that I created, right, like in my personal projects, I create this Sammy in here, and I have just one folder called references, right? So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna create another folder called ZBrush, like that. And then I'm gonna copy this address in here. I'm gonna go back to Maya. So Maya has this set project. Basically, if you already have a project set up, you can use the set project, but in this case, we don't have anything set up. So I'm just gonna click this project window, right? And then you're gonna notice in here that I already have something set in there, but it's not what I want. So I'm gonna just click new, and I'm gonna point to the folder that's the main folder before the SAM one, basically like the parent folder. So I have the SAMI folder created in there inside of personal projects. So instead of like clicking the SAMI folder, I'm just gonna click the parent folder, personal project, gonna click select, right? And then here, I can just give the same name, basically, like I'm just gonna call it SAMI, because I'm trying to trick Maya here because it's an existing folder, right? Otherwise, Maya would create automatically for you if it didn't exist. And by default, Maya uses all those subfolders in here: scenes, assets, images, source images, blah, 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 all those. You're gonna keep everything default. Just gonna click accept. So now if you go back to check what we have, so remember we just created the ZBrush folder and we had the references, right? And now we have all those different folders in here, right? Another one I'm gonna create is gonna be called OBJ. So normally what I do, I have this OBJ folder, which is where I bring models from and within ZBrush and Maya, right? Like between the two. So I export them in OBJs, but then all my Z projects and Z tools I save inside of ZBrush. So basically like it's separate. That's the way I have it set up, you know? And then it's important to have like this structure here created by Maya, because we want to make sure that when we render something, it goes to the correct spots. Everything that's rendered is going to end up like in the images folder if we set everything correctly. And everything that's like saved, like our scenes and everything, it goes to scenes, right? Like, and then everything that's textures that we're bringing from ZBrush, we're going to save into source images. This is like the main default folder that ZBrush, that Maya searches for images. So sometimes you're transporting, you know, this file from computer to computer, you know, it's like if you have a source images folder within the project and you set the project correctly, Maya should be able to find the images inside of the source images. That's kind of like the default it looks for. So just by doing that, now what's going to happen is this. So if I go to my, let's go to here. I hope those menus are not broken. This one worked. Okay. So if you click this little guy here, this is the render settings, right? Like this, there's a little clock in there with a little gear, right? This one here is going to open this menu right here. And as you can see now, when I look at pathing here, it's pointing to semi images just because we set the project just now, right? So everything is going to go there. In the same way, if I try to open any file, it's going to look for the file to open inside of scenes, right? So everything is already correct. So basically, like everything we needed to do here to make things correct, it's already working. The first thing you're going to be doing here, basically, like you're going to be setting up like all those initial scenes for you, like both in ZBrush and in Maya. And from that point on, we're going to be iterating in those same scenes. You know, it's like we're just going to take like one step after the next one. So basically, like for the file name here, I can just say Sammy, and I can just put like a number or letter here. And you can see like if I save an image right now, it's going to save with the name Sammy a.exr inside of the folder images if I do any renders, right? The thing that we have to check in here is this. It's a frame and animation extension right now. It's pointed to only single frame. So I'm going to change this to the name and then the number of the frame and then the extension, right? So in that case, it shows you two examples in there, right? So basically, like the way you're going to be doing this is that we're going to be setting up like different camera angles and keyframe each one of them. So basically, like the way I do is like I set up everything, let's say like 10 different camera angles, and then I press render and I go to sleep. Basically, like let it render overnight. And then in the morning, I have all those fresh renders I can check, you know, it's like, so that's the way we're going to be doing this. So initially, you're going to just leave at 10 in here for 10 different angles. If we need like more, we can just add more in there. But for now, that's the way we're going to be doing it. So add the name of your character in there with a little extension, whatever you want to do. Switch this one to name, number, and extension. And then let's leave this one the way it is. For the image size, I normally render at 900 by 900, so it's a square, so I can post on Instagram. But whatever you guys want to do, you know, it's like I think I wouldn't go very high because Arnold, as you crank the samples, you know, it's like it gets slower and slower to render. But I think 900 by 900 is a good compromise, you know, it's like it's a good size to render. So basically, like for this first tab here, let's see, render option, nothing, and scene assembly, nothing. So that's all we need for this first tab in here, right? For the second tab, then we're gonna go to Arnold render, which is the main thing here for us. The camera anti-alias by default is only set to 3. Later on, I'm gonna be cranking this a lot. You know, it's like I want to make sure that the hair renders smoothly, everything renders smoothly. So I'm going to be cranking the anti-alias quite a bit. But for our first test, I would start using like 6. So you can see something that it renders fast, but it's not like anything so crazy. You know, it's like for final renders, probably like going to be using 12, 14, whatever it is, and probably even cranking some of those to 3 instead of 2, right? But for now, I think 6 and 2 is fine. Adaptive sampling, I'm not going to be using here. This is kind of like it's a cool thing that the Arnold has, that, for example, like you can just define like the maximum anti-alias, and then it kind of like tries to adapt and do the best it can, like kind of like automatically for you. You know, it's like generating less anti-alias in certain areas and more in some other areas. I'm not going to be using the clamp AA for now, unless we have some fireflies or some artifacts, but for now going to be okay. We have different types of filters in here for the images. Some of them produce like much sharper images. For example, like you can get like much more detail, like pores and things like that. If you use something like, I think the black man hairs, there's this, you know, it's like a Catroom, things like that. But at the same time, if you look at the manual for Arnold, sometimes they say like, you know, so you can use Gaussian and then just like go down with the width, and you can get sharper and sharper results. So we start, the default is 2, right? But if you use like 1.6, for example, you can get a little bit sharper without being like screaming sharp, you know? The problem with like when something is super sharp is that basically like it breaks the illusion, you know? It's like when you're looking at the pores, you know, it's like a picture of someone's face in close-up. You want to see that kind of like a slightly glow, you know? It's like there's something that looks like a gel or something, you know? It's like the skin, when you see from the close-up, it's very, very interesting look. For example, like this is going to be one of the links I want you guys to save as well. This one is danielbolshan.com. And then basically like this one is the same guy who creates this image here for Gigapan, right? Like he has this page in Gigapan. That's the one I linked for you guys in there. It's the same guy, the same photographer, right? And he does this photographs with using a robot arm, actually. You know, it's kind of like this cartography of the face. Like it's a robot arm that actually takes multiple pictures and can get like super high res stuff. So if you click like any image like this, and you click like zoom in, right? This is like the best reference you can find for skin. Because it's really like nothing else up there, right? You can keep going like forever like that. And you can see everything, right? It's like super high resolution. So that's the thing, you know, it's like when you're using the Gaussian blur in there for the anti-alias, you want to make sure it's not like super sharp that breaks this illusion of the, you know, it's like this kind of like, it's almost like a gel, like I said, you know, it's like this translucency is so cool. And when you crank the sharpness too much, it almost like becomes a little bit more like a rock surface instead of like something that feels more organic and, you know, more, you know, it's like actually skin, right? So I'm gonna keep at 1.6, but just so you know, it could go like all the way to 1 or even lower, and you would get like something super sharp but not as natural, I believe. Some of this advanced here, we're gonna be using this setting here a little bit later. Is use auto bump in subsurface scattering. And what this does here is basically like when you set up your model to render it using Arnold's very smart about like splitting you know, it's like all the detail from the displacement map, shifting some of the stuff into bump maps. It works like this. For example, like if you bring a displacement map that's super high resolution that came all the way from HD from ZBrush, and then you plug it to your model in here in Maya, and all of a sudden like your model in ZBrush, let's say, had like 7 resolutions, 7 subdivision levels. When you brought to Maya, if you crank that subdivision level in Maya for Arnold to do it in render time, during the render time, if you put a 7 in there, it's most likely it's going to run out of memory because it's going to be pretty hard to recreate that with all the resolutions. So what you can do, you can actually do, instead of like 7, you can put 4 for the subdivision levels in Arnold. We're going to be looking at all this stuff later, you know, it's like very carefully. So don't worry too much. I'm just like explaining a little bit of the preview. So let's say you put 4 instead of 7, and then Arnold shifts the other 3 subdivision levels to a bump map. So when you do that, by default, the subsurface scattering is not calculated. It just like calculates for the first 4 subdivision levels, which is basically like just subdivided the model itself, right? But when you create this one here, when you click this button, this checkbox, then it's gonna probably like slow down your render quite a bit. It's gonna be like probably like 2 or 3 times slower sometimes, but it's gonna calculate everything, the subsurface scattering in every single cavity, you know, because of it's calculated based on the bump. For the ray depth in here, I mean, like the total here is 10. I'm gonna crank those ones a little bit. The fuse specular, maybe like put like 6 and 6 in here, something like that. The ray depth is basically like, you know, it's like how many walls the light has to cross to basically like to be able to reproduce and show you the result. So let's say if it's a surface, for example, like an eyeball, and you have like the outer part of the eyeball, the cornea, right? And you have like some, let's say you just added another bubble inside to simulate like the liquid inside, right? Basically, like if you have like just like one ray, right? Like for the specular, that means it's gonna hit just the surface, but it's not gonna go through it, you know? So if you have like to go through a surface that's transparent, that's like one subdivision, like one level that you have to go through. Then the next transparent one, another level, and then it has to bounce back to you. So you have to go back. So, you know, it's like if you have too little here for diffuse specular, sometimes you might be missing the bounce, you know, it's like, so you're not going to see the correct result. So just to avoid problems with transparent objects, I just normally crank those values. It's not going to add anything. It's just going to make sure that the rays are penetrating transparent objects, you know. Environment, we're not going to be doing anything with this, but you know, like you can create like fog, things like that, you know. Motion blur, nothing here. Lighting. Oh, the only thing we're going to be messing here, other than this, right, adding this auto bump later, it's going to be this textures here. By default, there is an auto convert textures to TX, which is a format that Arnold uses. And that's going to be dependent on how much memory you have in your computer. Because if you have like very low memory, let's say you have a machine with 16 gigabytes, which I do not recommend. I would say 32 would be kind of like a minimum these days. You might get in trouble if you're using a lot of textures like super high resolution. Let's say we're going to be using like 8K textures here. And if you have like 8K textures times 5 UDIMs, for example, it's a bunch of textures, right? Like it's a lot of memory is going to be used. In this case here, my computer have 128 gigs, so it should handle fine. So I normally turn off this one. I turn off the auto convert textures and this use existing texture files. I do this because since it converts the files, for example, like you export a new set of displacement maps in EXR, it converts to TX, and then from that point on, it locks to that file. Basically, like it's going to be reusing the same TX files that you found in there. It's not going to be converting again, unless you tell Maya to convert, to force it to convert and generate it again. So to me, it's a bit of a pain to have to generate everything, kind of like click every time and regenerate them. So I just like prefer to actually keep them off, and then I just use the TIFFs or EXRs straight away instead of like converting them. There is this menu here, Arnold. If you go to utilities in here, you have a TX manager, and this one shows when you have like TX files, you can actually you know, create TX for the selected, remove TX for selected. You can do all kinds of stuff around here, you know. But in this case, I'm gonna just like, in my case, just like keep it off. So if you have like, let's say like 64 gigs or more, or if you're not using like super high resolution textures, you know, it's like just 4Ks, for example, you can keep it off as well. And then let's say the last thing you're gonna be looking here is this system tab. And this one here, I'm just gonna be using CPU because the Arnold GPU for this type of scene, my scenes are like, I don't know, like I would say like over 16 gigs. And because my graphics card has only like probably like 4 gigs or something, no, actually 8 gigs. There's no way in hell it's gonna be able to load everything to memory. So it's definitely not gonna work. You know, it's like Arnold's is still kind of like baby steps into the GPU kind of thing, you know. It's not like Octane or some other more advanced stuff, like even V-Ray, right? It's much more advanced for GPU rendering. Arnold's is still a little flaky, so I don't use it. I just use the CPU. And for the bucket size here, basically like this is when you're rendering, that those little squares that shows like the progress of your render, right? The famous little squares. This is the size of the square in pixels. So like I did a bunch of tests, and I think the optimal for me was about 24 pixels. I did like a test with 16, 10, 32, whatever it was. And around 24 was kind of like what I got, like a faster render overall with my image at 900 by 900. But it might be different in your computer, you know. One of my students said that this auto detect threads in here, there is a setting that you actually put like -1 that's supposed to actually kind of like reserve one of the processor for something else, and apparently like make things, you know, faster or more efficient. But I cannot prove that, so that's basically what he told me. So I can either use like minus, like he said, or just use the auto threads in there. I don't know which one's going to produce the best result. And then other than that, that's it. When it comes to AOVs, I'm going to leave it to, this one for you guys to explore, because it's the kind of stuff that's a preference, right? If you are the kind of person that is very experienced with post-processing, and you want to render everything in layers, for example, like just the albedo color, just the SSS, just you know, it's like depth of field, things like that. You have all those passes in here. For example, diffuse, you can just like click this one and add a diffuse pass, right? And then you can render everything in layers. But in my case, I prefer to render everything in a single one. It might be a little bit stupid in a way, because you don't have the same control. But I tell this story, you know, it's like I remember back in the day when I was watching this documentary from Pixar talking about Finding Nemo, and the fact that they render everything in a single pass, you know, it's like back in the day, making sure that the render looked the best possible without any, you know, tricks or anything like that. I kind of like assumed that, you know, it's like as my motto as well. Like kind of like, you know, it's like I want to make sure that the renders look good. So if I have like, if the lighting is not quite there, I'd rather tweak the lighting, tweak the colors and stuff like that, and make sure that the image is as good as I can get outside of Maya. And then when I bring to a software like Photoshop or some other software for post, it's just like a few tweaks here and there, and the image should look good. You know, it's like, it's kind of like this, it's a little bit naive in a way, right? But, you know, kind of like I think a little bit more artistic approach in a way, because it forces you to be able to, you know, it's like to improve your eye, to make things look good within the render itself, right? But I'm gonna give you this render here, this link for you guys to look. If you just like type something like Arnold 5 manual on Google, you should get to this, you know, it's like page here. It's super complete. You know, it's like if you go to something like, let's say, there is no renders, it's a rendering right here, right? This is the front page, like when you click that link. So if you go to rendering, it's like, it's really complete stuff, you know. If you go to, let's say, like render setup, so they have like all this stuff in there, batch rendering, color management. Oh, color management is another one that we, you know, it's like you can take a look, because we just did that whole thing about downloading the ACES config, right? But they talk about this around here as well. So let's see. I think there is one that they mentioned. Let's see if I just put like ACES workflow right here, the first one. So ACES workflow. So if you are curious about like the difference between ACES and sRGB, so they show a result in here, you know, it's like the depth of the color, you know, it's like you can get more depth overall. So they say here, like, this is the advantages, right? Like wide range of color and light exposure, predictable image display on a wide range of display devices, preserving the full range of highlights, shadow, and colors. A lot of advantages, you know. And then that's basically like the ranges of color that you get in there. And they have like, you know, it's like where to download, how to install it, all that stuff that I did with you guys before in there. It's all explained in here. So make sure you check it out. You know, it's like this Arnold manual is really nice, and it's full of illustrations as well. So this one is under rendering ACES workflow. So make sure to check it out. So that's basically what I have to set up in here in my Maya side of things, right? Like, so we went through those. And now what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna just save a scene that's completely empty right now. and I'm gonna save using the save as, and I'm gonna just put like semi model, let's see, 1 MB. I'm gonna save as Maya binary. You have always the option to save as ASCII or binary. The ASCII is basically like it's a text file that if you know how to fix, you know, if Maya has any crashes, sometimes like the header, if you know what you're doing, you can actually fix a file that's corrupted just by changing the text, because it's a gigantic text file. But the thing is, like those text files are very big, and for the most part, you know, it's like I don't know exactly how to fix those files anyway. So I try to keep like saving different backups, and I use always like binary because the files are much smaller. So I'm just gonna do like save right now, and I'm gonna close my Maya. And the reason why I'm closing Maya is because if some crash happens like during this process right here, and my Maya is wasn't safe, my scene wasn't safe, and Maya was closed, kind of like he loses some of the configurations. You know, it's like I'd rather like just like save everything and then reset Maya for good. Now we are back to ZBrush in here. So in ZBrush, the only thing you're gonna set up in here is the document, right? According to your monitor. In my case here, 1080p, I just did a 1600 by 1300, and I changed the range in here for the background gradient, right? Just a little bit, just make sure it's great. And then for the other thing we're gonna be using here is let's just set up our multi-map exporter. We are not gonna be exporting anything today, but just to make sure we have everything in the same page. So I'm glad that I installed this new ZBrush, because now everything is reset. So that should be exactly like you guys gonna see in there. So a couple of things we're gonna have to set up in here for the displacement map. So I'm gonna go to Z plugin, multi-map exporter, click displacement in there. And we're gonna set up a couple of things. The first one, I'm gonna crank this one to the maximum here, which is 8K. That's the resolution of the image they're gonna be exporting as displacement maps, to make sure that it captures everything from the HD geometry, right? I'm gonna be explaining how to actually plan your meshes tomorrow. We're gonna be doing some good explanation about how to do it, and the reason why I'm using 8Ks, and how many UDIMs we can use if you're using 8K maps. You know, we can just like probably like 3 UDIMs at 8K if they are very well organized, and all the spaces are maxed out in the UDIM space. You probably can get away with 3 textures at 8K for entire face and shoulders, and be able to capture like, let's say like 90 million polygons, something like that. So I'm gonna do 4K, 8K. If your computer is having trouble with 8K, by all means use 4Ks, and then we just like talk about like using more UDIMs instead of like using just 3. You're gonna be using 3 times 4, right? So you're gonna be using 12 UDIMs if you're using 4Ks. So for the map border, I'm gonna crank this one a little bit. And this is basically like what ZBrush does when it exports the displacement maps. At the edge of each one of those aisles, he actually tries to duplicate the color and expand that, kind of like you know, create a little buffer to prevent like seams to be visible. You know, it's like, so if you have your mesh, let's say like the way you set up your UDIMs are too close to each other. Let's say if you're using like a very large map border and your DIMs are very close to each other, they might cross, you know, so I can create some artifacts. But in general, only 12 pixels in the universe of like an 8K image, it should be very minor. It should be just enough to cover that little buffer area. So just gonna click that one. For export options, first thing I'm gonna click is gonna be file names. And you see by default here, this is the old ZBrush and also Maya, right? Like the UUVV. So I'm gonna click this one until it shows UDIM like that. So keep clicking on it like that. It's gonna eventually switch to UDIM. You can either click override or not in here if you're planning for ZBrush to override without asking any questions, right? Just like goes over the previous files exported. And then that's all we have to do in here. So just switch to UDIMs and then override existing files, click OK. Let's go back right here. I'm gonna be clicking this button here, which is gonna be very important. And we're gonna be talking about this in the next classes. The reason why we're using it. I'm gonna click it, leave it for now. For the displacement map here, subdivision level, by default, it's 1. And the reason why it's 1 is basically like, you know, you always want to make sure that you're matching the lowest resolution of your model, right? Like you have like subdivision level 1, which is no subdivisions at all, and all the subdivision levels on top. So the way that ZBrush calculates things, it compares everything that's over subdivision level 1, and then basically like restores everything as a displacement map that's completely compatible with the subdivision level 1 to be able to recreate the model perfectly in another software, right? But in our case here, we're gonna be using subdivision level 2. And I'm gonna explain that as well in the next classes why I'm doing this. It's because the model we're gonna be using a low resolution mesh in ZBrush. That's gonna be, you know, easy for us to play with like primary forms and things like that. But before you export this, this model to Maya, we're gonna be exporting as subdivision level 2. So that's basically like the Maya model with subdivision level 2 is gonna be the minimal resolution in Maya, which is in ZBrush is gonna be the second resolution, but in Maya is gonna be the main resolution. The reason why I do that is because I wanna a mesh that's a little bit higher resolution in Maya to be able to groom and have like a, you know, it's like a little bit more control of the silhouette of the character. If it's too low res, right, like it's almost like the hair is not gonna conform completely, you know, it's like with the curvature of the skull, for example. So at 2 is a little bit closer, you know, it's like it's easier to predict and it's easier to paint faces as well than if you had something that's super low res. I'm gonna be clicking adaptive and I'm gonna be cranking this one to 4. And also I'm gonna be doing the mid here, I'm gonna bring back to 0. But I'm gonna be going one by one here why I'm doing those things. So if you're used to ZBrush exporting your maps and everything just regularly, you probably like, you're afraid to use like a value in here that's too high and adaptive, because this takes a way longer to export the maps if you're doing that way, right? But in case of HD geometry, it doesn't matter. You can actually use a very nice resolution like that, and it's still gonna export super fast. So I take full advantage of that, and I use adaptive and 4 for the DP subpix, which is basically like just a small blur, so you don't get like kind of like a stair-stepping when you're exporting the maps. It's a tiny small blur. And for the mid level here, this is basically like it's the default level that the displacement calculates things from. So if you have like a 0.5, that means gray. So it's 0.5 black and white, right? So it's like right at the middle. So it's like a perfect gray. So if you're using like 16-bit maps, you normally need this to be gray, because you need like the values to be either darker or lighter to produce like peaks and valleys, right? That's because the 16-bit scale is like, it's very limited, right? The number of, the levels of gray is much more limited. But if you're using a 32 bits, like we're gonna be using, gonna be clicking this one to 32 and EXR as well, then in this case, we can go and bring it all the way down to 0. And this is gonna be black. And then you're gonna ask like, how is it possible to go below black, right? And it's possible because it's a 32-bit maps, so you have a much higher, you know, much broader like levels of gray, black. You know, it's like you can get negative values and all kinds of stuff is a floating point. So you're gonna be able to have like a black map, and ZBrush is still gonna be able to produce like negative values that go below black. The reason why you're using 0 here is because that's what Arnold expects. So that means like we don't have to do anything else in Arnold, in Maya. So just keep at 0. So just like a recapping here of the whole thing. So we're gonna just be doing like a 4K. We're gonna be using the map border a little bit higher, kind of optional for you guys in there. File names, make sure it's UDIM. This is very important. You're gonna have to mesh this in Maya as well. And optional, override existing files. And then here, we're gonna go and gonna turn on switch morph target. Subdivision level, we're gonna keep at 2. Adaptive, maximum DP subpix. 0 for mid value here. And then 32 and EXR. Everything else is the same. So that's gonna be our ZBrush file in there. A few other things here to look before we do a little sculpting. Let's look at those things here. So some other links that I posted in there from that page, right? Those reference online material. This one is very cool if you're going for likeness. This is from one of my former students, and he did all this stuff before he was my student. The guy kicks ass, you know, so he didn't learn this from me. So he has a very interesting way to look. There's an article at Artstation, right? At what to look for when you're doing likeness. You know, it's like from silhouette to the type of camera lenses you're using. You know, if you're this one is a very peculiar one. You know, it's like how to find, for example, look for police records, because that way you can get like the front and the side view. And most of the celebrities, they got in trouble at some point, right? Bunch of freaks. And then when you look at the movie frames, for example, you can get like very unusual angles that you normally would not be able to see from here, right? So if you look at an image like that, right, you don't have an idea about like the shape of the nostrils in here. But sometimes by scrambling, you know, it's like looking at the movie images and stuff, sometimes there's an angle you can pause, and it can actually reveal, you know, it's like the exact shape of the nostrils. And then you can get the, you know, complete the picture. When it comes to likeness, the way I describe it, it's basically like it's a puzzle, right? Like you cannot have enough images to be able to assemble that puzzle. You know, it's like unless you took like I don't know, hundreds of pictures to be able to capture every single angle, right? It's very almost like impossible. So when I do my likeness work, I try to paint an impression of the person. It's not like a perfect likeness by any stretch of imagination, you know. I'm not using like blueprints. I'm just trying to basically like eyeball everything. And the problem with eyeballing things is this: the same face under different lenses, it can look completely different, right? I'm going to talk about this tomorrow a little bit more in depth when it comes to likeness. But I mean, like you can go to from a lens like this, which can be like, let's say like a 50, right? And then you can go to something like this that's probably like over 150 or like a 200, for example, right? And it all depends of the proximity to the camera as well, right? So if you're looking at the likeness, for example, you're trying to capture a certain facial expression or someone walking on a red carpet, right? In the red carpet, the photographers don't have access right there on the spot. They're outside, they're kind of like behind fences. So they probably are using like a zoom lens, right? Like something like, I don't know, a 70-200 or a 300 millimeter or something. And in that case, the face is going to look fairly flat, right? And then if the person comes a little bit closer, right? Like you can use a little bit of wider lens, wider angle, and then you can get something that looks a little bit more like that, right? But in general, what we do with our portraits, it's kind of like there is no rule of what we can do or we cannot do. But I would say like if it's just like a face like this, isolated to the face like that, a good lens for a portrait, I would say like if it's just face, 100 millimeters to 135, it's really good for this kind of angle. Some people prefer flat, even flatter. So you're gonna use like even like 200 or something, right? But if you're gonna go like for a head and then all the way to the chest, for example, so you get the chest and the head, I would say that 85 is kind of like the ideal portrait lens, right? And then if you're gonna go like all the way to the waistline, for example, like the head all the way to waistline, let's say like a 50 millimeters, and then like full body at 35 would work, right? But again, like there's no rule. Some people prefer more or less depth, right? But the cool thing is that if you start like understanding what those angles do, those lenses do, you start seeing things that are very peculiar. For example, like you see the nose in here in relation to, let's see if I can open that bigger. Let's see. Yeah, like that, right? So you see the nose in here looks bigger in this picture in here than it looks in there. The ears look wider in here and more visible than they look in there, right? So this kind of stuff informs, you know, and over time you start understanding that if you see an image that the nose is looking too big and the ears are kind of like starting to hide behind the frame of the face, then you can tell that's kind of like a wider angle, right? Like it's probably like a 35, a 50, something like that. But if you're seeing the ears completely revealed and very open like that, the nose is not as big. It's kind of flat in the face like that, right? You can tell that's a lens that's pretty, you know, it's like, I don't know, 200, something like that, or even longer than that, right? So over time, I mean, like it's part of this puzzle that I mentioned, you know, it's like it's you're gonna be able to to see those things, you know, those little tricks. But yeah, take a look at this page in here. It has very insightful stuff in there. And then there's this other link that I posted in there as well. It's this one talking about the windows of the soul, right? Like the eyes. There is a little bit of rotation in the eyes that I normally use. We're going to be talking about proportion and placement for the eyes, everything to create a little bit more of an illusion of life, right? And here he goes through this, which is very interesting, you know, talking about the eyes, the pupillary axis, you know, it's like the eyes, for example, the pupil is not, we have this tendency of making the pupil right in the middle of the iris, but there's no such thing. It's always a tiny little bit offset, you know, it's like if you want to go for super realistic, you're going to have to do that kind of stuff, you know. There's the distance between the pupils that has an average, the size of the eyeball itself in relation like to the depth. It has a difference as well. It's not a perfect sphere. It's a little bit elongated. But all those things, I mean, like sometimes we try to simplify, you know, it's like we do those things like, let's make a perfect sphere because it's easier to rig and things like that. But anatomically, you know, it's like if you really want to go for something more perfect, then you would have to create a lot of asymmetry and things like that, right? There is this other link that I posted in there. It's called researchgate.net. And this one talks about the facial wrinkles, which is like they have like their own little names, you know, for example, periorbital lines, you know, it's like those ones that right at the corner of the eyes. And they always follow the same pattern, you know, it's like the way that they form. There's this other one here, right in between the eyebrows, you know, it's like the same shapes as well. In certain people, you're going to see them a little bit closer together, some more, you know, it's like more asymmetrical, one higher, the other one a little lower. But overall, those are kind of like very common lines, you know, that you're going to find. So this is a cool link because it talks about all those kind of like common things, you know, it's like, you know, a little bit more wrinkles, less wrinkles, more, you know, frequency or things like that. But in general, the position of them is the same, you know. So it's cool if you're trying to idealize a character that, you know, it's like to understand those things, the positioning of all those things. It's always like the way I talk to my students. It's about understanding what's, it's almost like when you're sculpting it, you have to try to imagine you're touching that surface, you know, because as humans, we're very familiar with human forms. So when you understand, for example, like looking at a ear like that, you can tell this area is more rigid because of the cartilage. So you're going to be able to see that if you have like, every time you have some rigid form, you know, it's like next to a form that's very soft, it's almost like the water basically like shocking against the rocks, right? You're gonna have this effect. It's kind of like a ripple effect, and everything. It's kind of like one of those forms influences the next one, right? Like kind of like they shock with each other and create those ripples. So it's very cool to always like every time you're sculpting something, you just try to imagine you're touching that surface, you know, it's like, because as I said before, I mean, like we're always specialists in skin, even though we sometimes we never sculpted skin, we know how it feels because we are humans when we touch the skin like so many times. This is an excellent source of references. This is from Palomita, one of my former students as well. She's a kick-ass artist. And you can find me here as well. So Palomita's Mega Reference Archive. Take a look at this one. She has a little bit of everything here, which is quite amazing, like including like the super high resolution skin details in there, right? And this one is someone posted recently. It's kind of skin stretch. This is kind of like an old thing that came out like 5 years ago. And it shows like how the skin stretches, you know, it's like basically like it stretches and shrinks. And it shows like the frequency, how this thing works. There are some studios doing that kind of stuff, like calculating the stretch of the skin and auto-generating the stretch, you know, it's like based on normal maps or displacement maps. So the dynamic microgeometry in here, right? Like the way it's creating it. In our case here, because we're simply sculpting, we're gonna be able to actually learn how to understand, learn how to observe the form and try to recreate this sculpting, right? So if you're sculpting someone already posed, for example, a smile like that, I'm gonna be showing you guys how to create this effect of the stretching of the skin, you know? And when it's more neutral posing, then I like to create the pores a little bit more in a relaxed position, a little bit more rounded, right? But in this case here, it's just like out of curiosity to see, you know, this study here. It's really cool, you know, it's like showing the stretch of the skin. And then that's about it. So let's open for you guys to ask any questions, and then we're gonna start doing some sketch as well. Trying to get some fun here. I'm kind of rusty, you know. It's like since April, not doing any sculpting other than some work I did for ILM the past months, but I was mostly sculpting vegetation, not really humans at this point. You guys have any questions? Something that I missed in there? Feel free to ask anything. Well, that's good. You guys are on top of it. Let's see. All right. Let's start doing something here. So for my the way I approach like my models, you're gonna see like if you go through my Instagram, sometimes I start like from a cube, sometimes it's from a sphere, right? It doesn't really matter. There's one of the classes I started from one of those heads, like from ZBrush. I believe it was let's see, demo one of those head planes, right? I got one of those. But I'm gonna leave up to you guys. I mean, like how you're gonna approach it. But I'm gonna be starting with a sphere in here. So let's do it. Let's click this one here, Sphere 3D. I'm gonna make a polymesh 3D so I can sculpt. And I'm gonna change this shader here, which is pretty awful. I don't know why they keep this shader. It's so bad. And I'm gonna the best shader for me is still the oldest shader in ZBrush, which is this one here. If you go to Material, and you're gonna go to your basic material, this one here, which is not like you know, one of those matte caps or anything. It's just this regular material. You're gonna go do some tweaks here. I'm gonna do material modifiers, so I can actually crank the specular some more, and I can change to a little bit more broad spec, so it gets a little bit more of this blend quality to it. And I'm gonna crank the diffuse a little bit more, and the ambient to 10. So let's keep this one. Let's say 90. So 10, 90, and then some specular here. I crank to 50 something. Let's do, yeah, 50 should be good. And then the curvature a little bit more, like instead of that, right? It looks a little bit more plastic. I'm gonna do a little bit more blend like that. But that's kind of like, you know, now if I add any color in here, I can actually play with it. Let's do a little kind of clayish. Let's subdivide it. And so basically, like for my sketches, I learned to love to use the Sculptris Pro mode, right? If you never used it, it's very cool because it subdivides everything in real time, right? And the way it works is like this. So if you show the wireframe like this, for example, if you want to try to, it's almost like you can decimate things on the fly, you know, and it's all based on the size of your brush. So if you make your brush really big like this, and you use the shift to smooth, look what happens. Oops. Let's see. Whoa. There you go. Why is it not doing it? Let's see. It's so interesting. Okay, let's see what's happening there. Why is it not working?
Subdivisions.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, that's right. It's just, either can freeze it, or I can just like go back to my lowest. That's right. It doesn't accept it. So let's try this one. Yeah. Geometry. No subdivision in there. Let's see. Oh, there you go. Okay, so if I have like let's just press X to get my symmetry in here. So look at this. If I have like a very small brush, it subdivides quite a lot, right? If I have a bigger brush, it does that. So basically, like, it's a very cool tool to even like you know, to almost like decimate things on the fly, like I was talking about. So for example, like the way it works, which is really cool, is that if you use a very tiny brush like this and you try to carve something, look how much subdivision it adds to it, right? So when you look from perspective like this, it basically like he only adds the detail that you want, right? Like, so if you go big like that, right? And then if you go small like this, it's a totally different amount of resolution that you get. Look at that. So I really like this because sometimes you can just like get like super low resolution meshes doing this, you know, which is really cool. So let's start like by pulling my referencing here. And I'm gonna put this guy on the side like that. Yeah, that just shows how rusty I am, getting confused with the subdivision levels there. So for this guy here, I'm gonna start like just like trying to get some of those angles, you know, it's like some of those shapes in there. And you know, starting from a sphere is going to be easier in this case here than trying to start with a cube, you know, so I can and chamfering everything and trying to nail things in there. But again, it's going to be just like a painting an impression of this little guy, you know, instead of like trying to really nail anything at this point. It's just like going to be just a sketch. Let's try. Let's see. Let's get that profile picture. This one. Let's keep it open on the side. Like that. And let's try to get maybe like this is very cute, man. It's a very cool face right there. Let's get this one around here. This one right here. And you know, it's like during those classes are gonna be, everything you're gonna be sculpting is gonna be basically like eyeballing everything, right? Like I always try to challenge my eye, you know, so I can try to learn how to see things better, you know, it's like without using like blueprints and stuff, just because, you know, it's like we do way too much of this, like in our professional work, like using a lot of, you know, it's like all the resources we can get, and kind of like miss a gigantic opportunity of like really training our eye, you know, it's like to get better, you know. So that's why I kind of do this almost like a personal challenge every time. But I'm not going to force anyone to do that. You know, it's like if you guys want to use blueprints, if you want to use like texture XYZ for your textures, whatever you want to use, it's fine with me. You know, I'm going to try to help you guys to get the models and the renders better over time, but without like, you know, it's like this thing about like, oh, I'm going to be forcing you to do anything. You know, it's like feel free to do whatever you need. Let me just maximize this one. So for my brushes here, I have a bunch of brushes here that are going to be showing you in the next classes how to create them, like the pores and all that stuff we're going to be doing. But for the most part, the brushes I use the most for this kind of work is the clay buildup and the move brush for the most part, and the smooth, obviously. But the clay buildup, the only thing I do differently here, I reduce the intensity from 20 to around like 3 or something like that, because I want to be able to use my pressure sensitivity, you know, it's like to do something like, you know, almost like drawing the surface, right? So I can use like a very, very little intensity or something a little bit more like that. And I like the feel of it. If I'm working on the model later on, sometimes I switch the alpha to something like a round alpha, but this square one is pretty cool to just like really chamfer things, you know, as I can, and make a, you know, it's like for sketching. So basically like this one, the move brush and the smooth brush. For the smooth brush, there's another smooth brush that you can use right here under the light box. You can switch your, replace your smooth brush with a stronger one, which can be very, very useful sometimes. So basically, like if you go to your, let's go to Z3, blah, 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 the brush. So go to brush and go to smooth right, where is smooth right here. And then you're gonna go to the smooth strong, which is, where is it? Smooth stronger, this one. So this one here, it's cool to use because later on we're going to be using like HD geometry, and then sometimes like you're trying to smooth out an area that's very high resolution, and you're not going to get a lot of result, you know, it's like you're going to have to smooth like subdivision level by subdivision level. So you're going to go to the lowest, smooth a little bit, go to a little bit higher, smooth a little bit. But with the smooth stronger, it can be a super high res and it smooths like a lot, you know, it's like it really gets like to everything. The trick about this one here is that if you're not in HD yet, you're probably going to use like a much lower setting. For example, like 5 is going to be equivalent to something much higher, or 2, you know. So that's the only difference. But I really like the smooth stronger. It's one of my students who would suggest to use, and I really like it. So yeah, let's start with this guy here. First thing we're going to be doing, we're going to be playing just with the move brush, very simply. And then again, I have my symmetry on. So I'm going to do like just maybe like create like some eyes here, just like mark some area for the eyes. Just like, oh, the way I did this is basically like just press Alt. When you press Alt, you can actually move things using the normals as a reference, right? So just like you can go to any angle, you just press Alt. So that's why I did the eyes in that position right there. We're gonna move it around here a little bit. And then I'm just gonna go, and I'm gonna pull this area forward a little bit. Bring it in. The beginning is always interesting, isn't it? Because it's just like we have no concept. And my models, I never know where they're gonna go. You know, it's like I start with an idea, you change, and then there's a lot of other things that come up. And then the character is not there for a long while. You know, it's like you are not seeing the character for a long while. And then all of a sudden, the part that I like the most about the process is when the character shows up, you know, like one day you're just sculpting in there, and then all of a sudden, like you start seeing the personality, which is really cool. So I really like that part, you know, it's like to meet the character. That it's always you know, a risk. I mean, like doing stuff in real time, you know, it's like that you never know if things gonna work out or not, and it might as well fail, you know. But the thing is, like, you're working with the virtual clay, so there's nothing is ever lost, you know. It's like you can always fix a model, you can re-dynamesh, you can do whatever, you know, with a model. And so I always take it easy, you know. It's like do what I can during that day. Sometimes we have a day off, like that you're not like, you know, your greatest, and then, you know, next day maybe you do something a little better, and all of a sudden the model comes together, you know. And I really like that part when the model starts to come together. I think I might go for a facial expression straight away, but in this case here, his facial expression is very asymmetrical, right? So I'm gonna have to actually sculpt symmetrically, and that's another thing that for you guys, if you are like traditional artists, sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around. That you know, it's like you can use symmetry like to help you to cut the time by a lot, right? And then so I try to do things like very symmetrically for the longest possible time, or at least until I put like all the pores in place. So we're gonna go like for a good chunk of time, like just you know, it's like sculpting symmetrically. But then at any time, once you have your topology in place, you can save that as a morph target, and we can switch, you know, so I can go back and forth and use like something that's symmetrical and then asymmetrical, and then be able to actually, you know, if you're used to asymmetry and all that stuff because you come from more traditional, then we can do that. But in our case here, let me just turn my symmetry, my perspective on here, because at off it's going to be a little awkward to sculpt that. But let's see. So let's go back in here. And at this point here, I'm just sketching whatever I'm seeing, right? Like I'm not like in the process of, you know, it's like over analyzing at this point. I'm just going to try to capture a little bit of this guy. So I'm just going to smooth this area here. And you see when I'm smoothing it here, I'm adding more geometry, right? Because of the, look at that, because of the Sculptures Pro mode, right? But I'm not going to add too much at this point. So I'm just going to add a little bit of volume around here. So get like, I'm gonna have to get like his little eyes in there eventually, just to have a little reference in there. The glass is gonna add a little bit of a challenge in there too, right? To identify what's the, you know, it's like what type of glasses those are, what kind of like, you know, visual problem he had. So it's the kind of stuff like we're gonna have to research and see what this little guy had. But for the nose in here, let's just get this one detached from the bottom a little bit. He has a very small little nose, kind of like a part that sucks in here is that I have to move this around a lot to be able to access my menu. I'm gonna get the nose a little bit narrower. Switch to my, yeah, it sucks. I think I'm gonna have to do what I did last class, which is basically like create some custom interface and put my most used brushes down there. I didn't do it because this is the new ZBrush, but otherwise it's gonna be a pain to just like be switching from one to another one. At this point here, I can start actually very carefully trying to determine like the, you know, it's like the zygomatic boning here. So basically like I can start just by adding a little bit of the representation of it. I'm gonna add like a little diagonal like this and pull it up right there. This is gonna go over. In his case, it's pretty well defined in there actually. I'm gonna go over here towards the ear. At any time, obviously, you can just like, let me just increase my smooth here to 5. Even more than that, 10, let's see. Like that. Let's just remove this. Let's define this little nasal labia in here, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? Like in his case, it kind of wraps around quite a bit. So I'm gonna go all the way around here. And this is just like a very loose sketch, right? We're gonna be pulling things around quite a bit. Just gonna get the facial in there. And later on, I might actually change the facial expression. You know, if it's something that's too similar to him, it's gonna be easy to say like, oh yeah, that's the little guy. But since I'm gonna go for someone a little bit more generic. The thing about this is that at this point, I'm just like trying to get the main features, kind of like a little bit of representation of them without too much concern about the distance at this point. You know, the distance are going to be moving stuff around just because I can. You know, it's like the great advantage of working with the digital media is that if you have like something like traditional media, you have to nail like the primary forms from the get-go. Otherwise, there's no way back, right? Like there's no way you can actually fix a third, right? Like once you have like all the proportions wrong, if you add like the secondary forms on top of that, nothing's gonna fix it, right? But in our case here, we can actually work as getting like a kind of like a rough representation and then move stuff around and reorganize and try to get those proportions, you know, it's like in distances more correctly. I'm gonna leave it to you guys how you want to approach it. Normally when I do those sketches, I go for the mostly like focusing on the secondary forms because they define a lot of the character, right? And then the primary forms, like I start adjusting as I go as well. You know, it's like I'm gonna do some of that and I go all over the place. I go like to the lower part of the face like I'm doing right now, go back to the upper, and then slowly start like building up and fixing those proportions, you know. But I just like this fun of having no plan, you know. It's like kind of like just wing it, and then later you just like start fixing. But I understand that some of you guys are more like you know, it's like need to have like a structure that's a little bit like tells the story a little bit more, you know. Kind of like you need to have like the eyes right in the eye sockets and stuff. And in my case, I actually work with the primary forms and the secondary at the same time. And I use and I work with the secondary and the tertiary at the same time as well. So they are not independent, you know, it's like they're always codependent. So it's a different approach, I would say. But it's just because, you know, just because I can, because like it's such a flexible media, you know. Otherwise, I would be making a much better planning for everything, just like traditional artists do, you know. But in this case here, it's just a matter of like trying to capture like a few of those elements in there, almost like doing a sketch, like a drawing, you know. It's like, so you do from the front. If I turn it around, it's gonna look pretty bad right now. Not like it's looking great from the front either, but if I turn around, right, it doesn't look quite like that because we didn't have time enough to do anything. But eventually here, when you start pulling, and in that case, because it has a smile, right, like this curvature here, it's going to be more than what we have in there. So we're probably going to start wrapping around zygomatic bone in here. It's gonna go under it, right? And now we're gonna be able to pull just a tip in here, like a little bit lower like that. And the corner here of the nose, there's a brush that I use here, which is this one here. I normally make it, I have a couple of them already create this carve in here, but the way I create it, instead of using the DEM standard, I just use a standard with alpha 39 plug. And then I just tweak this alpha, something like this, a bit more pointy. And then I switch my stroke lazy mouse from 0.25 to 0.02, something like that. Now I have like a very pointy kind of brush like that. You just have to look for the intensity now. Let's go back to like 12 or something like this. This is basically like the brush I'm going to be using to carve wrinkles, and basically like a lot of stuff around the face is going to be done with the same brush. So you're going to be, you know, if I want to carve, just define the little corner here. Once you have all this stuff marked, then what we can do, we can just like come with an H polish brush and just start specifying our planes. Get a lot of those planes in place. So I'm gonna go like from here. This curvature in here is an interesting one because some people, they, you know, it's like they make it disconnected, but it's perfectly connected, right? Like, so if you have the nasolabial fold in here, it wraps around this area of the nose, and then you have some volume that's created on top in here. Depending on the facial expression, sometimes you see a little bit of a division, you know? It's almost like this is compressing against like the beginning of the zygomatic bone in here, and you start seeing like a little bit of that compression building up at the top. So we're gonna be doing that eventually, but not right now. And then from time to time, if I wanna make sure I understand that there is a plane change in here, I can actually draw this plane almost like this. Can do a little line like this, right? And then later on, I can just come, like I said, with the H polish, like this. And I can just like help to define those planes and separate them, right? Why those planes are important? It's because like, you know, it's like if you're looking at your model from a certain distance under a certain light, if you don't have like those planes well defined, it's almost like it gets lost, you know? It's like later on, obviously, this is not a cartoon, so we're gonna be smoothing it out, right? We're gonna be softening this whole thing. But at some point, it's good to have the plane just to remind you, you know, it's like it's there. There is a change of surface angle happening, right? So let's go back to my move brush here. And let's pull this whole area of the muzzle here. I'm gonna bring it down. You have to remember that there is like the teeth is underneath this whole thing, right? And in his case here, he has a quite broad kind of like a, you know, area in here. But you have to remember that when you turn from the bottom like this, you have to make sure that this is an arch or arc, right? Like that. So basically like sometimes you get too caught up like doing something from the front, and then when you turn like this, either this is like there's not enough depth for the smile, which is a very common thing, right? You have to have enough depth to be able to reveal this this curvature, you know, underneath the nose in here. So from here, I can actually start just like doing a little sketching of the. Let's go to standard. I can actually pull just like start sketching here, just the nostril. I don't know how deep his nostril is going to be, but it's cool to actually keep this line, you know, it's like following this curvature. So now I can actually get my clay build up. I'm just going to dig it and add some depth in there. And then obviously we're going to start building up all those other structures around here, reinforcing this area and everything. But let's go back to our little guy in there first, and let's look at the rest. I tried to spend some time now with the clay build-up, because like switching angles in there, like switching brushes is a little bit of a pain in the butt with the pictures on the side. Basically, like from the corner of the zygomatic bone in here, right? That's basically you're gonna get your zygomatic muscles coming this way towards the corner of the mouth. If you're sculpting like creature and stuff like that, sometimes people like tend to put like very, very big, you know, define like kind of like it starts just like this, you know, it's like if I do like a very strong version of it. So you have, you know, it's like 1, 2, right? But in this case here, it's going to be quite subtle. So we're just going to sculpt what I'm seeing there, which is basically this. From the corner here, we're going to put just a mention of it, but without going too literal just yet. And I'm using like mostly like the pressure sensitivity in here to help me out. And then around here, I'm going to dig this area deeper to be able to accommodate the loose smile in there. And just like I did with the upper part here with the muzzle, making sure that I have that curvature, right? From there, you're gonna have to do the same with the bottom part. So I'm just gonna make sure that the lips are stretching enough around here. I'm gonna fill up this area a little bit. Oh, my smooth is not strong enough. Let's see. Let's try to do a little bit bigger so I can actually put a little decimation in there. Same for this area. Let's decimate this a little bit. Let's put it out. I really hope, like with this whole thing about updating all this software today, that I'm gonna be okay. You know, it's like I hope those things are not more unstable now than they were before. So now that I have like the zygomatic bone like pre-stylized, right? I was kind of referring to the side in there. One thing that happens sometimes, you see some features like this, and then all of a sudden you think like, oh, that's super deep, right? And sometimes it's just the light angle that makes things look very, very pronounced. But then when we start looking at other angles, you start looking at, you know, like, you know, it's more subtle than it looks in there. It's just because it has a very harsh light on top. So I'm just gonna smooth this area out a little bit. And then again, you're gonna go and cut it towards here. Let's pull this whole area back as well. It's gonna be like a combination of a lot of move. Here. Chin. And his nose is gonna have the little bump right there. And we're gonna have to see what's the relationship around here as well, because he has this very tall forehead, right? So it's gonna be tall, a lot of volume in there. And it's interesting for me as a study because, you know, it's like this type of form, like this split right here in the middle, it's much more subtle, like kind of like a, you know, it's like a, I'm not gonna say a normal person, right? But more average person. It's very, very subtle, but in his case here, it's cool to see that it's almost like gives us ideas, you know, for, you know, it's like sculpting like different types of characters, you know, it's like in little gnomes and creatures and things like that. It's pretty cool, man. It's like, it's such a cool little human. So yeah, eventually here, you're gonna be able to nail the proportion and everything. But for now, it's just getting a little bit of this corner right here. You're gonna pull it back. Sometimes another mistake that's very common is to keep like very shallow like this, right? And it's good to have a little bit of, you know, it's like depth in there in the corner, because again, like from the bottom, you see like here we have the curvature of the muzzle already, but when it gets like to the zygomatic here, you're gonna have to pull it forward a little bit, because you have to make sure that the eyes are kind of flat looking forward, right? So like the corner of the eye here, gonna have to pull it back, and this inner corner, bring it down. Make sure that, you know, it's like from other angles, things are working. And then the forehead, he looks like a dolphin right there, right? So we're gonna have to actually pull this area here as well. And add more form in there. It's a little big smooth in there. From the top, this is basically like it's the reverse of what you expect, right? Because like, you know, it's like with women and men, there's a difference in terms of like the way that the cranium behaves, like from the top. In the case of men here, this is kind of like the proportion here is a little bit more like this, you know, it's like it gets like bigger in the back and much smaller in the front. With women is a little bit different than that. But in his case here, to me, is a mystery because I don't have like a, you know, it's like a way to see how it looks like from the back. But looking from this angle in there, I can tell that his head is a little bit bigger in the back part. But here, obviously, they're gonna have to start adjusting those as well. And maybe adding a little bit more of his masseter in here, which we can actually define here as well. Let's see with clay buildup. So I'm just gonna define a little bit of his masseter, which is a little bit small, right? Like he's a little, so I'm just gonna add a little bit of an angle in here. And I'm gonna start bringing towards this. Try to, you know, it's like if you have your zygomatic bone right here, which is a little bit funny still, we just started. But it's almost like the forms have echoes, right? Like, so we have like the zygomatic, I'm gonna do very strongly here. I'm gonna destroy my mouth a little bit so you can see it. But, you know, it's like you have this lining here, right? And then you have this lining here. And then you're gonna have your masseter coming around here as well, right? It's a bunch of different things that are kind of like the forms are interconnected, you know, it's like they wrap around each other. You know, it's like they do this kind of like interesting forms. It's kind of like almost like a drawing, you know, it's like things go in flow. So same with this, right? Like it goes like this towards the ear. And then you have another one that goes like, oops, like this, right? Go towards your temporalis in there. But yeah, it's very interesting. But in this case here, we're just gonna be trying to paint an impression here of his jaw line, which is like, again, it's gonna be a mystery in his case, how things look like, right? But the general norm is that a jawline for a man is more squarish, like that, right? And for a woman, it's a little bit, has more of an angle, it's a little bit more delicate like that. So sometimes you see like some actresses like Angelina Jolie, for example, with a very, very masculine, you know, it's like type of jawline. And conspiracy theories, you know, on YouTube are amazing, man, because they say that most of the actresses are actually men. But my theory is different. My theory is that I think like those people, you know, it's like they pick, they cast people who are very androgynous looking, you know, it's like because that way they can actually be more flexible, I think, you know, it's like if you have someone who looks like a guy and a girl at the same time, you can, that person can play any kind of role, you know, it's like you can do like, you can be a very flexible kind of actor or actress. So I think that's the deal, you know, it's like, I think they are picked because they are very androgynous looking and not because they are men or women, you know. So, but that's my own theory. So let's go back in here. Let's just establish this line a little bit more. And then I'm gonna start picking this arch here for the orbital bone. It's gonna be adding a little bit more volume right here. So that way you can actually capture. It's so delicate, man. It's like, it's almost like, again, I'm using like my mental library of stuff that the way I normally sculpt, and I have to kind of ignore it because in his case, he has a different type of structure in there. The whole thing about like, you know, like men have this, women have that. Sometimes, you know, it's like with someone with unusual features, you know, you're gonna find both things in one. And it's very interesting to me. It's like, it's a good exercise for sure. One thing I have to tell you guys is that there's something very weird happening here in California right now, which is there's some crazy fires every year, right? Like every year there's like fires everywhere and all that stuff. So this year, what's happening is that there is a wave of heat in here that's pretty insane. It's like it was 105 degrees outside the other day. I think today was close to 100. And then because of that, people are using the air conditioners like cranked all the way. And then seems like the grid is not able to accommodate everything. So they're kind of like forcing blackouts. So they are turning off the light for good, like for I think like 1 to 3 hours. And I got an email, not an email, message today saying that they are planning to do this today between 3 p.m. and 10 p.m., which is like right when we have our class, right? And then what I had to do, actually, I had to plug one of those lithium generators. You know, it's basically like a gigantic power battery. It's like 1,500 watts or something. And then I had to plug it here. And I'm just saying all those things because there's a big fan in the back of it. It makes a lot of noise. So probably like for the class, like today in the next 2 days, we might, you guys probably gonna hear a little bit of more noise than usual, like in the recording. But that's my disclaimer, you know, it's just because I wanna make sure that I'm able to actually teach this without any interruption. So I have my computer, my internet stuff, you know, it's like the modem, everything's plugged to this generator right now. And it's keeping things running, you know. It's like, so if something goes down, I hope that we're gonna be up and running, you know. But that's all I can hope. I don't know exactly what's gonna happen, but yeah, just so you guys are watching this later, you know, it's like there's a little bit more noise in there. It's not gonna be like every single time. It's probably gonna be the first 3 days because that's the time they are saying like we're gonna be having that problem, you know. So let's do a little carving here for the mouth. I'm gonna do it like just with my thin brush that is standard with the Alpha 29 in there, 39. Just gonna carve. He has an unusual asymmetrical mouth shape in there during the smile, so I'm just gonna do the kind of like an average version of it. And I'm gonna start cutting this a little bit more inside here because that's lip around there. So I'm just gonna do this. This whole area is gonna have to go. I'm gonna have to carve it. This sketch here, the reason why I do it this way, I just like do like a free sketch, like I said, and then this sketch is gonna be evolving during this week, all the way to Thursday, which is the last class this week, right? So we have like four classes a week. And then on Thursday, this model should be refined enough. It's not gonna be perfect. It's not gonna have the proportions all perfect or anything like that. It's going to be good enough for us to project it into a base mesh, right? And I'm going to be talking about the base mesh. There's one that I made available to you guys, but my disclaimer is that's not perfect at all, right? Like it was done with ZRemesher. I would strongly encourage you guys to work on that, like to clean it up if you want to start with it, or simply use like your own meshes, you know, for that. But we're going to be talking about that in detail tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we're going to be actually using ZWrap, which is an incredible software developed by those Russian guys, which is the, you know, I'm using like all the time now for this kind of stuff. You know, it's like projecting from a sketch or from a scan, if you have scans, into a topology. You know, it's like, and you can get like all the details in it. And it's kind of magic, you know, it's like the whole thing, the way it works is like, it does a spot on kind of, you know, projection. But there's a couple of things, of course, like you have to work with some selections, sometimes save some morph targets so you can actually recover some certain areas when you have problem with them, you know. But overall, it's very, very cool. So let's do this. Let's go in the bottom right here. I'm just gonna do like a selection like this. Let's create a little neck in here. Leave a little space for his chin in there and the back of the head. And just do this, invert the selection, And let's just bring this down right here. It'll look very weird for now. But just so you have a little bit of the beginning of a neck in there. And smooth this. Yeah, this how you call, like, the Sculptors Pro. It's a very cool thing, man. In the past, I would just be using the Dynamesh and all that stuff, but after this, man, this is so good, you know. The fact that you can do like a very free form, start from nothing, and then create anything. It works especially good with the snake hook, for example. If you guys tried with snake hook, it's also, of course, like it's based on the size of your brush, right? So if you have like a big brush like that, it's gonna look a little weird, right? But if you have a smaller brush like this, you can create like spikes that can go forever, you know. It's like if you have something like, you know, and it creates the topology for you on the fly, right? So it's really cool for that kind of stuff, you know. It's like if you're conceptualizing, it's really, really nice. So let's get again, like the clay build up. So at this point here, you see like the entire sketch is being done with 3 brushes, right? Like it's just a clay build up, the move brush, and then that little modified center brush, right? So around here, I'm gonna start changing the angle in here. The sides of the nose, it's gonna vary like from person to person, obviously, but it normally is a little bit flatter in here, right? You're gonna get a little bit more flat. And then if you kind of try to simplify the nose, yeah, it's almost like if you try to create like planes everywhere. So that's gonna be a big plane in here. You can even do with the edge polish here. Let's do like a little bit more intensity. Kind of like create like this nice bigger plane around here. Some people prefer to use the, you know, it's like the trim brushes instead of the clay, the edge brush, edge polish. I like the edge polish. But the thing is, like in the past, using the edge polish, it seems like he behaved a little bit differently, and that happened a couple of times, like in ZBrush lifetime. You know, it's like that. Sometimes some brush that I really liked the way it worked, something was slightly changed or adjusted, and all of a sudden, like the brush didn't behave exactly the way I remember, or I'm just getting old and I forgot about it. That can be very, very possible because, yeah, age. So the interesting thing about like his chin in there, right? He has a little bit of a second chin, right? So I'm gonna try to, first I'm gonna carve this one a little bit more because it has this lips right around here. But then he has a little bit of that line in here that's actually reinforcing the smile. More towards right here. He has this little chin around there. Let's just do a little smoothing here as well. And then he has a little second chin as well. So let's dig this area here deeper around here, just to keep this little ball here. And let's just go to the side and look at that image right there, which is basically like shows that the profile, this little chin goes quite low. And then comes back here. Everything is separated, right? Like, so his jawline is a little bit shorter. It's kind of an interesting thing. It's like someone who aged very, very fast, but he still has like a young kind of like structure in a way. It's weird, you know, it's like the bone structure changed too, obviously, but it's just, it's so interesting. It's like, it's going to be a challenge for sure, but it's going to be very fun. It's my intention, you know, it's like the next, like maybe like 2 classes, just like I did with the ethnicities, is to do like unusual conditions, you know, just as a way to explore. You know, it's like I had this idea a long time ago, like people with like some physical conditions, you know, exploring the beauty of that as well, kind of like, you know, it's like all God's creatures, I suppose. see. So yeah, a little bit of a neck coming back, still a little bit like that. And then the base of the cranium here is an interesting one because you're gonna have something here. Oops. Which is gonna be, let me just like draw it very quickly here. So right here, I'm gonna get my little skulls here, which I have like from Anatomy Tools. Right, let's get one of those little guys here. Those guys are cool reference. They're small versions of, you know, and they're pretty cool because it's very easy to see like the, you know, the mastoid process here. So you have like obviously like you see like all those 3D models, and a lot of people like put them super strongly, right? Like the sternocleidomastoid is this muscle that comes from behind here, right? Like if it's someone like a, you know, it's like a superhero, you're gonna have a massive one and everything, right? But in this case here, he has like a, he's probably not gonna have like a super strong one, although it looks a little bit strong in there. But what happens here, so right behind the maxillar, so like the jawline here. So let's say if you define that ear, it's around here, and the ear normally has an angle, right? It's never like that, right? It's always like, it has a little bit of an angle like that. So if you have the ear around this spot, so you have your eardrum in there. So right behind the ear around here, coming from that spot, you're gonna have something that's called the sternocleidomastoid, is the mastoid process, right? Sternocleidomastoid process. There's a process which is basically like just this little piece of bone that's around here. It creates this little shape, and that goes up. And then if you draw a line, for example, like a dotted line from here, let's see, like from the zygomatic, a little bit of an angle like that. This around here is going to be probably like the deepest point of the cranium. So you're going to have a little bit of that point you're seeing right there on him. It's basically like what you're going to be doing here. So that's going to be the base of the cranium here. So I'm going to get my move brush. I'm just going to pull this out slightly like that, just to remember me that that's like the deepest spot right there. The process in here that I mentioned is going to be a little bit more pronounced like that. It's going to have a little volume right around there. It's actually too much from when I see from the front now. It's gigantic, but from the side, I want to be able to see it. So from this little bone in there, for that process, that's where your sternocleidomastoid muscle is going to start, right? It's going to be hanging from that spot and down, right? It's going to come all the way from there. And then from there, obviously, it's going to, one part of it's going to connect to the sternum. The other one's going to go to the clavicle. It's going to be connected to both at the same time. But yeah, so I'm just going to make a little bit, reduce a little bit of the volume, but just to show where it connects, right? And then this, obviously, there's, the volume here is not huge at all. It's just because I'm still fighting the perspective in here, trying to get a little bit of everything in a short period of time. So, and then from the side in here now, if I define that that's basically like the deepest point of the cranium around here, that means that I'm gonna have to start coming back with this area here. And then in his case, there's a little bit more volume at the top, right? And then obviously I'm gonna be fixing here the profile, but then when I look from the front, it was like, you know, all wrong, right? Because eventually you're gonna be working on everything here. And then like we said before, always good to sketch, right? Like if you're a traditional artist, you're probably like, you're not ashamed of just like, you know, add lines to kind of like to help you like with the proportions and things like that. Same thing here. I mean, like sometimes it's worth to just like, okay, let me just do a little bit of a sketching here. Kind of like help me to find like the temporalis, for example, right? So if I find something like the temporalis around here, and this is my zygomatic coming back there, then in this case here, I can start actually working with the move brush again to correct those distances. So I'm gonna pull this out slightly around here, add more volume. one out as well, just to increase a little bit of that volume there. We've got a little square now. His backing here is probably a little bit more pointed. That's what we are seeing there in the image. Got this. And then from here, since we are here, this is another one that's tricky, is this relationship between the zygomatic bone in here and this depth in here. So we're gonna have to actually bring it down a little bit to kind of like have that silhouette in there, you know? And that's gonna reveal a little bit of the corner of the orbital in here, which obviously are gonna need more volume eventually right here, around here too. All this area is gonna start like filling up. But first, obviously, they're gonna have to move around, like see like a perfect position for his eyes. I'm gonna bring this all up a little bit here. And I'm gonna have to figure it out without the distortion of the glasses, which is another little challenge, but shouldn't be too bad. Just gonna increase the size of the eyes in their eyeballs. So just get this one down a little bit. The ears, we can start pulling stuff. I mean, like you can just do like this, just like select that little area and invert. You can just like, let's see. Let's bring this one around here. And then you can move this. You can press Alt, right, to move this freely. And you can just put the pivot, let's say, around here. Something like that. And you can just rotate like that out and bring it in. Just get a little bit detached in the back. Like that. Just to have a little something, little elf ear in there. And then obviously, this we're gonna have to dig pretty good. Starting from here, like really detach the ear from the rest of the cranium. And then when you get to this area here, then it's blending time, right? Just like really blend with the rest of the face around here. Just to have a little reference for ear, Nick actually dig a little bit in here just to have a little bit more of a shallow thing. It's interesting, like the way that the lower part of it, it's pretty cute right there. It's like it comes down here. And then this area here, since we defined our temporalis, so we're just gonna bring it in around here and then out more towards the back to have that little upside down egg that we were talking about, right? So it's a little bit narrower in the front, like that, and it expands in the back of the cranium. It's kind of like upside down egg in there. And then obviously, like from the top in here, the interesting thing about the zygomatic bone, right? Is there's a hole in here. If you look at the skull, right around this area here, you have a hole because this muscle that comes from the temporalis, it connects all the way down to the masseter in here, to around this area here in the maxillar, the jaw bone, and actually pulls the whole thing, right? Like, so it can actually create a strong bite. Normally, like if you're watching an animation, right, and someone is like is chewing something really hard, right? You're gonna see like this muscles firing here, like in the temporalis, and also the masseter firing pretty much at the same time, you know, as you crunch something. So it's pretty much like because those muscles go underneath this zygomatic bone and just connect to everything else, and making sure that you're able to chew it, you know, so it creates some pressure in there. But yeah, so that's basically it for today. You know, it's like it's just like today was just like putting the scenes together and starting a little sketch. This sketch here I'm recording, as you can see. And I'm gonna put like all this stuff like to process, like the videos to process now. And it takes about like between like compressing everything, uploading, and then there's the encryption, all that stuff that happens. It's about like 2 hours. So I would say like between 2 and 2.5 hours from now, this video should be online for you guys to see. And then meanwhile, while I'm waiting for it to process and all this stuff, I'm gonna continue to work on it. So you're gonna be able to see this whole thing from the beginning to a more advanced state that probably gonna be posting like both in our classroom and also in the Instagram, you know. So you guys can see like how it started from that sphere all the way to the, you know, to the next step after this. But this is just a little first sketch in there just to get familiar with the face of the little guy. I just want to say like thank you so much, guys, for, you know, like for trusting me to do this. And my intention, like during those classes, if you watch anything before, you know, it's like the previous ones, is to always like try to make sure that you guys are getting what you pay for, right? Like it's not like a cheap thing, you know, especially nowadays with people, you know, it's like during this time, like some people are out of jobs and stuff like that. So I want to make sure that everything that I'm teaching, I'm, you know, it's like I'm providing you tools to create something, you know. So I think like the strongest point of this whole class is mostly like to create life, you know. It's like it's about like the eye geometry, the shaders, you know. It's like I'm gonna be sharing everything. So basically like the shaders like for the skin, for eyes and everything. I open every single node and I explode every single one of them, explain how it was done. If there is any question in the middle of the process, I can repeat, do mini tutorials in between, you know. It's like something like, okay, I don't know how you did that one, can you repeat that? I can do a mini tutorial and make sure that you guys are getting that, you know. So it's always a pleasure, you know. It's like there's always a very talented group of artists, and I see myself put on the spot, you know. It's like because I, you know, I can definitely fail and do something that, or say something that's not correct, you know. It's like with a lot of professionals out there, and make me look bad, but you know, that's the risk we take doing stuff live. But it's always a pleasure, guys, and hopefully tomorrow we're going to be able to push this image, this model a little bit further, you know. It's like explain a little bit more in detail the options, like for the secondary details, the way I'm approaching them, and also going through like the topology, UDIMs and all this stuff, like planning the model first before we can do something like really get into the meat and potatoes. Right now it's just like a sketch, you know. So I hope you guys appreciate it, and I thank you so much for being here with me. And tomorrow, same time again. You guys have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Have a good night.
Thanks. All right.